Remember when we talked about our families of the heart? Well, we're back with another look into them today. For those just checking us out, families of the heart are families who are together by ways that may not be, quote, unquote, usual, or biological means. They're not what we tend to assume automatically when we think of a family unit, but they are no less valid, and they love one another no differently. This week, my guest, Sarah, talks a bit about her experience as an adoptive mother and how it shaped her view of parenthood. I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is the NIAM Project Podcast. Hey everyone, what's up? As I've mentioned, I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is the NIAM Project Podcast. And you're listening to episode 10, Families of the Heart, Adoption. I don't personally have a background in adoption, but luckily, I know someone who does. Serra Hadsell is a documentarian and photographer living here in Portland, Oregon, with her son, Emmett, and her husband. She is kind, calm, and a very involved mother. But to get there, the road was long, and it called for a lot of patience and self-reflection.
So I have a 4.5-year-old, and we adopted him. We brought him home when he was 2 days old. Wow. So that's where I fit in. It's funny because the process for us was long, as I think it is for most people, most adoptions. For us, we were one of those couples that were like, we live together, we're committed, but we're not married. It just not really important to us. And then when we started thinking about adoption, we were told that, you should get married, you'll look more appealing to the adopted family. So we got married. That was in 2011. And that was basically like a formality for us, to kind of get on this journey, right? So the things you don't think about. And we brought Emmett home. He was born November 21st, 2014. So that was like a year, 3.5 years later. Wow. And throughout that time, it was just like always uncertainty. It was like, they tell you just keep living your life and, go on the vacations and do the things. But there's always this part of you that's like, well, if we schedule this trip to the East Coast, and then we get a call, then we might just miss out on our baby, right?
Like a possible, yeah.
And so it was just really bizarre. And I, everything that I did for work, I had to be like, well, if we bring a baby home before then, like, who's going to do this work for me?
So was that uncertainty happening for like the whole 3.5 years? Were you just like,
so it was about
constantly
2 years
on
of
it?
Wow. Yeah. The first 1.5 years was us sort of figuring out what the landscape looked like. We knew that we didn't want to do international adoption, and we knew that we didn't want to use an agency that was fundamentally religious. And we knew that we were interested in open adoptions. So it narrowed it down pretty well, but we went to a couple of open houses and info sessions. And then once we'd picked a place, we had to do like this monstrous amount of paperwork.
It always comes with paperwork all the time.
Yeah, it was, I ended up writing like 30 pages worth of answers to questions, and not everybody is as verbose as I am. My husband and I both we're both natural writers, and the story is big. So there's lots of questions like, how do you plan to deal with discipline, and how were you disciplined as a child, and what did your childhood look like, and all kinds of questions that potentially an adoptive family, like the birth parents would be interested in knowing.
Basically just had to write your own like autobiography, basically.
So, yeah, kind of, from this weird perspective of a parent that you've never been. Right? It's all hypothetical.
Like, how would you take care of kids? Well, I don't know. Like, suddenly you're having to figure that out. That's
what do you
crazy.
feel like about education and just all this stuff? And so, of course, the less that I know the answer, the more words go into it. So yeah, there was that process, and that took like 6 months, kind of. There was the home study and all the stuff. They have to come and do all the stuff that, you know, at the end of it, a lot of people are like, man, it sucks that we have to do that and people who have bio kids don't have to do it. And at the end I was like, man, everyone should have to do this. I mean, it was a lot, but it really grounded us. It really, you know, thinking through all that stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think through.
Kind of forced you to think about things that you might not have thought about beforehand.
And have those conversations with your partner so that we're not blindsided by things like discipline. You know, we're kind of on the same page from the start, which was actually, I think, really helpful for our relationship. It's interesting, our history independently. My husband, his mother ran a home daycare.
Oh.
So he grew up in a home daycare and kids around all the time and watching how discipline is happening and parenting modeling and, you know, kind of being that role model for the younger kids as he got older. And I did not. I had like no experience besides taking pictures of kids, which is not the same.
No, not at all.
So I actually wrote that in the book that I made for him about his adoption. How, you know, the parenting thing was kind of natural for his dad, but for me it was like, I know how to talk to kids to get them to behave in the way that I want for pictures, but when it comes to any of the real stuff, I just didn't really know.
Especially when you're, you know, their parent versus like a brand new person who,
exactly.
you know, they're
so
trying
like
to figure out.
Bottle feeding, like I had no idea what I was supposed to do, you know. It's like my husband just picks up the bottle and starts feeding the baby, and I'm like, I really should know how to do this.
I should know how to do
You're
that.
gonna have to teach me. So we're a little bit backwards in that way.
Of course, every adoption is different. There are closed adoptions, wherein the birth parents aren't involved at all. There are adoptions from foster care. There are international adoptions, domestic adoptions, and a number of other kinds. In each specific situation, a hard choice needs to be made. How and when do you talk to the child about where they come from? How much do you tell them? For Sarah and her family anyway, perhaps due to her career and documenting everyday moments, honesty has been the best policy from the earliest point possible.
We talk to him regularly about it. It's one of those things, when kids are little, you talk to them about things that they don't fully understand and they glean a little bit, you know, and then they get a little bit older and they have more experience and more context, and that sort of thought that you planted, it comes back and they
Helps them to understand more and more each time.
They understand more and more, and they ask questions. The first time that I remember being really aware that he was processing this, we had met up with some of his birth family, not his birth mother, because she has been hesitant to have a relationship with us. But he has 4 older half-brothers, and so we met up with the father of one of those brothers and 3 of the brothers. And he was 2-ish, just under 2. And a couple months later, we have this little book that I made for him that is pictures of his family members. And it just says, like, here's a picture of Mama, and it says, Mama loves you. And then it's a picture of Daddy, and Daddy loves you. And then there's Grandma, and there's Auntie Erin, and there's Birth Mom, and there's brothers that are not in his life. And there's all the people that are on his birth family, too, are in that book. So he's had that book. It's a board book. Aww. He's had that book for basically his whole life. And So a couple months after we met up with this part of his family, he was sitting in the back of the car and I was driving him home, and he just said, "Mama," he's like 2.5, "why is Krista shy?" Krista is his birth mom. And I was like, that's a really interesting question. So I thought for a couple seconds and I said, we don't really know her, so we don't really know what her personality's like. We don't know if she's shy. And he just accepted that. Right. And who knows how much of that he understood, but as I processed his question, what I realized was we had just met up with a bunch of his family that he recognized from that book, and his birth mom was not one of those people. And so why doesn't she want to get to know me? Like, that's kind of what I think was under that question.
Right.
Like, she must be shy. That's why.
Aww.
And so there's a lot of that kind of thing in adoption that sort of, we have part of the story and that has to be good enough for now. And we can hold out the hope that maybe one day she'll be open to having him in her life. But for now, we send pictures and that's how it is. It's a little strange. For me, because I'm a visual person and because I love pictures and I'm a photographer, it's very easy for me to share pictures and things with them. It is a little bit difficult not to get much back. For a long time, we were hearing back from the father they're together with the birth mom. So it's a little bit strange. They're in the same house and they have sort of different relationships with us. But we haven't met up with them a while. Anyways, he sends pictures sometimes of like, oh, she put up pictures of Emmett on our refrigerator, so that I kind of know that they're being received. But I never hear anything from her. So it's a strange relationship.
That is a very interesting relationship because he's definitely bringing that up to let you know that she is accepting parts of it, but she's also obviously not ready to outwardly accept other parts of it.
Yeah.
Is that something that you feel that you worry about pretty often, about how you're going to have to bring that up with your son at some point?
No, I don't really worry about it. I try to put it kind of into conversation. He has the normal confusions that a toddler preschooler has about, like, was I in your belly? And like these kinds of questions. And I try to answer them as matter-of-factly as I would if he had been in my belly. Like, no, you weren't in my belly. We went to pick you up from the hospital and you grew in Krista's belly. And so he knows these things. But they're all sort of swimming around like they do at that age, right. Just with a little extra layer of complexity there.
Definitely not simple, but what mother-child relationship isn't, to be fair. For the people out there who can't see right now, which would be everyone, you actually brought me some books that you have made for Emmett.
I did.
So tell me a little bit about what's in those and what inspired you to make them for him.
So one of them I mentioned already. It is a board book that just has pictures of all of his family members, including the ones that he sees every day and the extended family that he doesn't necessarily see every day but will go to visit, and his birth family. So they're all, in this book, they're all kind of equals, right? So there's mama, and there's birth mom, and there's grandma, and there's auntie, and cousins, and all the different things. So he's had access to that for as long as he's been able to hold the book. And I think that has been helpful to sort of normalize the idea that there's different kinds of extended family in his life. And the other one that I made is his coming home story. So when we were waiting for him, when we knew that we were matched, was about 2 weeks before we brought him home. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind after this big, long expanse of uncertainty. And of course, there's still an ounce of uncertainty in there because until they sign the papers, they have 48 hours to sign the papers. Oh, wow. They can still change their minds.
That's terrifying.
So it was a little anxiety producing.
A little. Just a little.
We felt pretty good about it, though. Like the way that her caseworker had talked to us, she seemed very at peace with her decision. So we felt like this was going to be good. But we did have a short amount of time, and so we spent that time setting up the little co-sleeper and, you know, buying a gift for birth mom and writing the letter to her and the things that are kind of customary with the open adoptions. And so I took a picture one day of our bed with the co-sleeper, and it was not like neatly made or anything. It was just like, you know, I got up and I looked at our bed and there's this like little baby bed attached to it, and we've got no baby, but it's, you know, it's like getting real, right? That was, so I put that picture in this book, and I wrote above it and I said, you know, like we were getting ready and it was getting real, like so that he can kind of understand our experience.
Right.
And then I hired a friend who's a photographer as well to come with us when we picked him up. Aww. And so she came with us and she took all the pictures that I would never have had the brain space to take, you know?
Yeah.
And of course that includes pictures with us in them, which is really important to me not to have been removed from that. And so I have some really wonderful memories in there of the first time he was handed to me and the first bottle that his dad fed him. Aww. And I wrote things like, well, let me read you so I took stories. So the beginning of the book is all just a story about when we found out that he was born and when we found out that we were matched with him. And then this is one of my favorite passages, which says, "We had to sign a lot of papers while we waited nervously in an empty hospital room, but we were so happy when Butch carried you into the room. The first person who said anything was Daddy. He said, 'Oh, he's so cute.' And it was true. You really were." So it's like that kind of tone where there's, you know, there's a lot of love and adoration for him that's put into this whole story, so that when he is processing the fact that he was adopted, he can put all of that in with the sort of uncertainty.
And has he gotten a chance to look at that book yet, or?
Yeah, he has. He's I feel like some kids are really interested in pictures of themselves, and he's just not one of those kids.
He's just not.
He's, you know, I put pictures up in his room and he likes them, but he doesn't pull the books off the shelf, at least not yet. It's really, I'm very curious to see what will happen over time.
That time is coming.
Because he is so young, yeah, and the questions are not so real yet, and he's not in a peer group where there could be teasing or questioning. At this point, they're so, I don't know, they're just so open.
I feel that a number of people who I've talked to who are considering adoption fear the questions most. Not just from the children themselves, but also from their peers. What about some of the cruel comments that are sure to be made? What about the things that people may say, by accident even, that are out of order? Sarah both does and doesn't have those same fears, she says, as she plans to handle it when it comes.
Mostly, I just hope to handle it in the moment. I feel like my past will inform the present, right? Mm-hmm. So all of the questions that are coming up when he's a little more naive, give me practice time to talk about things with him. I love stories. I love all stories, especially human stories. And so when I see stories about people who were adopted as kids and are now grown up or are now teen or whatever, I always tune in and like read them because I'm so curious. And the problem, of course, with the availability of stories and media and information right now is that it's easy to assume that there's a right way to do something.
Yep.
And so I read all these stories, and what I learn is that people are different.
Oh, yeah.
And so the questions come up about the whys and the, whens and the what happened. And different people have different kind of baggage that makes them react to that in a specific way. And I feel like his background, like his growing up story, has been open enough that I'm hoping he will not have some of that baggage. But, there's no way to know. At this point, I feel like I don't think about it a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
It does come up. It comes up in all kinds of subtle ways. Like, he looks a little bit taller than average, and somebody will say, "Oh, is his dad tall?" And, you have to make the decision in the moment of how much do I want to say, because his dad is tall, but his dad is also not biologically tied to him, so there's not really any correlation there. Even this happened once with someone who was a friend of ours and knew the whole story, and she still slipped and was like, "Oh, well, he'll probably be tall, right? Your husband's tall." And I was like, "Yeah."
Yes,
and she was like,
tall.
"Oh my gosh." It's just so natural for us to say some of these things.
It is.
And we're pattern seekers, and so we're always like, "Oh, he has your eyes. Oh, he blah, 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 blah." And my son is white and has hazel eyes and brown hair. He looks like very passable, as though he could be our bio kid. So it's very easy for that. So it frequently comes up with people when they say something like that, and I say, "Well, actually, we adopted him, so we don't know." But yeah, he is a little bit tall.
You're right, he's tall. But I don't know.
Also, he just grew an inch in the last 4 months, so.
Oh gosh, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Just outgrow their clothes overnight. It's ridiculous. No matter what, as with anything, unless you're in it, you can't truly understand what comes when you make the decision to adopt. To those of you who may be considering this option, and to those of us who just want to understand a little better, Sarah offers this advice.
I think there are a lot of cultural expectations about adoption, things that were true for maybe our parents' generation that are not true anymore, at least not as the norm. So, for example, my son's birth mom, her birth mom was adopted. So she grew up in a house with someone who had been adopted in, the 20s, in a totally different time. And so she grew up hearing all of the difficulties that her mom had. Stories about her mom being at the hospital and her grandmother being really uncomfortable because there were medical questions, history questions being asked, and it wasn't really common to talk about adoption, and her mother feeling uncomfortable because she was like, "I don't know how much I should say." She knew she had been adopted. But I think that is a lot of the problem with, I don't know, the culture's perception of adoption is sort of based on the experience of people who are in their 40s or 50s today who are adopted. And kids who are adopted now, like my son's age, largely if it's a domestic adoption, it's a totally different story. Usually you have some information about their family, their birth family. Sometimes you have relationships with them. I know people who have adopted and see the birth family every month or something, frequently. It's just very different experience now. So I think there's a lot of fear about the sort of brokenness that people associate with the like searching and wondering where you came from, that we as parents of adopted children now have power to fix. I mean, clearly we're not going to fix the world, but if we are open with our kids and talk to them and normalize this, they don't have to feel like they're different and weird. It goes along with all of the conversations about families who have two moms or only one parent or whatever. They're all families and they all came together in a certain way, and adoption is just another one of those ways. I've seen a bunch of videos and things over the last, 8 years or so, about the vernacular in our culture surrounding adoption and trying to change it. So there's things like, oh, he was given up by his birth mom, which is a very, very normal way of thinking in our culture. And people with kids who have been adopted now, who are young, are trying very hard not to ever say they were given up. Because most of the time, that was not like, oh, I just give this kid up. There's like a lot of thought that goes into it, and they make a plan, and they have a part in choosing their story. So there's a really good video that people could watch. It's called, "If You Wouldn't Say It About a Boob Job, Don't Say This About an Adoptive Family."
I like that title. I'm a fan of that title already. That's amazing.
It's a great little video, and the dad who is, presenting in the video is a character, and they like illustrate what it would look like if you said all of these things about a boob job, like, so how much did that cost? Do you love those as much as you would have loved your real ones?
Wow.
So, this isn't necessarily something that I wish people had told me, but I feel like it's like a light spin on sort of a heavy topic.
And I think that's brilliant. I definitely think that would be a great thing to check out for a lot of people, myself included, because I could guarantee you I haven't always used the right words, because you don't know,
You don't know,
so.
Exactly.
Usually, I do the follow-up stuff, but I thought I'd leave Sarah to do it this time, because she has a message for anyone who'd like to follow up with her.
They can find me on my website, which is serravision.com, and that's the main way to sort of go get info. I love meeting people. I like hearing people's stories. As I've mentioned, if people are listening who are thinking about adopting or are going through infertility struggles, that just want to kind of see someone who's on the other side, I'm always happy to get coffee and chat with people. Of course, if they want to work with me, awesome. I love that. The way that I do my work, it's very focused on relationships, and I think that really helps kids who are adopted or who have joined their family in a non-traditional way, because it's easy to feel like you're other or different, or that you don't quite belong. And if you have a book of photos that shows you in context with your family and shows everybody smiling together and shows the love that you have in your family, that looking at that over and over again can really cement the fact that you do belong and you are a part of this family.
Totally. Having done photography too, one of the things that I always thought was amazing is, during I can't tell you how many families I had who I took photos of who would spend all of their time in follow-up emails apologizing for, oh, I'm sorry that, little Billy would not stop running away. And I'm sorry that, Janet wouldn't stop crying through the whole thing. And then you look at these photos and, all you see is them standing together lovingly holding each other. It's like we get so hung up on the negative portions of things, or like on the things that don't get done, or the things that were happening that we didn't want, that we don't tend to notice that we are a beautiful family unit, and that's what those photos are for. So and you do absolutely gorgeous work, so I think that anybody who is listening should definitely check into getting one of your documentary sessions. I think those are awesome. So
thank you.
You're welcome. So that is all the time we have. Thank you very much for giving me some of yours today.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
The Niam Project podcast is written and produced by me, Ariana Bradford. You can find out more about us at weareniam.com or on social media under the name The Niam Project. For the record, Sarah's website is spelled S as in Sierra, E as in Echo, RRA, followed by the word vision.com. And you can also find her website in our show notes. Thank you again to Sarah for giving us some of her time this week, and we'll see you next time.